Welcome to another episode of The Artist Report. I'm Braden Flynn, your host, and this is a recording from the November gathering of Connecting Things SoCal. Connecting Things is a once-a-month speaker series where we hang out with tons of creators, makers, designers, artists, photographers, and business owners. Then we have guest speakers who come in and share their insights on what they do and how they do it. This month's speaker was Dane Sanders, who's an author, he's a podcaster, he's a business coach, and runs an annual conference called the Go Summit. His main organization is called the Gobi Collective, if you want to check that out. But there's a lot in this talk about bringing your business to the next level. Hope you love it.
So I don't know where I'm gonna stand. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be right here or so. You all are an intimidating group. It's good to see you. I have a chance on a fairly regular basis to travel and speak and address a lot of folks, but I rarely do it in my hometown. And I think it's because I'm terrified of really dropping the ball and seeing you at a coffee shop and realize they'll be like, you're like that. And I don't want to be that guy. But so I'm all in this morning. I'm going to cram about 2.5 hours worth of content into about 15 minutes. And I'm committed to that because I know you guys all are workers and you have work to do. But my hope is that by the end of this time, there'll be some bug in your ear that as you walk out through your day, something will just kind of resonate and it'll help spur you on to a different way of relating with your work. I came up with this silly little slide to start, the foolproof way for creatives to be ballers at business, and it's not about basketball. The reason I put this up there is I had a chance recently to speak at an event for luxury weddings. It's like Uber event hosted at a bunch of different places around the world. They hit a new spot every 6 months. And it's very expensive to go to this conference. In fact, it costs like $3,100 after travel and lodging. It's like $5,000 to go to these things. The reason I tell you that is because this event, it's only for a certain class of luxury wedding vendors. And when you go there, they give you a name tag. And on the name tag, they literally have little balls that hang from the name tag. And each ball represents how many times you've been to this event. So you can imagine how intimidating when you show up as a guy with one ball, and you show up and you're like, okay, here I am. And there's people there literally with 10 balls. Like, there's a baller right there. He's a player. And each one represents $5,000. You're like, oh my gosh, these people are like serious. They're after this thing, this effort to create significant value with their talents. And as I reflected on that event and got to know a lot of these folks, and as I thought about this work that I've been in the middle of for the last decade plus, working with creatives of all sorts. My background is photography, but I spent a lot of energy with creatives who are trying to make something out of what they make. It keeps hitting me over and over again that showing up at an event and spending $5,000 is not what makes people the best in the world. That might be like a filter to figure out how people can gather, but it's not actually what makes people. What makes people ballers are what they do after those events and in between those events and the spaces between like a gathering like this and what you're going to do at 9 a.m. this morning and for the rest of your day. And I also get into a lot of conversations with folks where it becomes really evident to me that if you consider the level of skill that folks are carrying. This is a bell curve. And this is like, if we were playing basketball, this is like LeBron James. And this is me shooting free throws. And in here is the heap of the curve. And we live in a moment where the truth is, I would argue most everyone in this room, not everyone, but most everyone in this room, you're in this section. Is that fair to say? So if you're in this section, the good news is you're in the game. The bad news is you don't have any more excuses. Because you don't get to say I'm not an outlier, I'm not out there, and you're good enough to be at this gathering, so you're not down here. So we're all in this section right here. And I would argue that for most of us in the digital economy, we're really freelancers. You have talent. We might work for a company. You might not just be trading your time in for money exclusively. But for most of us in the room, we have a talent, and we're leveraging that talent every day in the work that we do. We're trying to get money for it or value for it. But the challenge is, I know many of us face, is we feel invisible. We navigate, anyone besides me feel like it's increasingly challenging to stand out in the crowd that you're competing in. 6 of us, that's it? Okay, 70 of us, that's much better, appreciate that. And the challenge is so great, and the freelancer problem is getting bigger. Currently, there's around, the best numbers I could find is around 53 million freelancers across all spectrums, and that number is growing radically. It makes sense, right? Like a spouse loses a job, all of a sudden you're a freelancer. You get married and you see your wedding photographer, they're awesome. You're like, I could do that, and now you're a wedding photographer. And the barrier to entry is so low in so many of these industries. Everyone can get in the back door. And because of that, it's increasingly challenging to stand out. For proof, my wife and I were wandering through our neighborhood, no kidding, like a week ago, and I came across this, you can't totally see it, but this is, it says here, Cutting Edge Salon, right here in Newport Coast, and then right next door, like that's real, that's like a real thing, this is the world that we live in. So the question becomes, how in the heck do you put yourself in a position where we can stand out when this is what we're up against? And I would argue it comes down to one fundamental idea, and this is the idea that I want to bug you with for the rest of your day, and hopefully your week. And the idea is really a mindset shift. It's how you relate with the work you're doing. And I would argue that it comes down to one singular word, and that's owner. When you decide to be an owner of your business, with the kind of chutzpah that the owners have, there's just a different response. There's a different way of relating. The stereotype is like you stay up late and you get up early and you work really hard, but it's more than just the stuff you're doing. It really flows out of your committed way of being, not what you're doing. The being part comes before the doing part. And what's great news about that is wherever you are in that bell curve, you can decide to be an owner way in advance of you having proof that you are an owner. It's attitudinal, but you have to choose it. Now, I would argue that if we got more practical, and we will in just a second, I'm going to jam through what I call 7 buckets of entrepreneurship. And I would argue that entrepreneurship is probably the easiest way to concretely become an owner, to get really serious about 7 areas of business that if, as a creative entrepreneur, if you do this, you will create what I like to call unfair advantages. In this way, unfair advantages are good things. If you want to compete, you need them. And ironically, many of you have them, but they're hidden. You don't actually know where they are. So as we approach this, all we're going to do is give you a broad stroke set of categories for you to kind of think about throughout the day and ask yourself, might I have an unfair advantage in any of these buckets? So let me jam through them real quick. And by the way, quick credit to this. It's a great little resource written by a book by Josh Kaufman called Personal MBA. Personal MBA. If you hit me up on Twitter or somewhere else, I'll let you know later where that is. But Josh wrote a really great resourceful book around these 7 buckets that could be helpful. By the way, side note, I used to lug my books to events like this and try to sell them. No one would ever buy them. When I recommend other people's books, everyone buys them. So I'm sure Josh will thank me later in life. So these are the 7 buckets, really quick. The first one is value creation. Value creation. And this one, on the surface, it sounds obvious, but ironically, in this era, it's so tempting to skip this part. One of my favorite examples of this, and I'm going to embarrass him just for a second, is Cole Crecilius with Crochet Kids. What Cole has done with Crochet Kids, not he, but he and his team, is they have created a radical commitment to creating value out of the product they make first. And then they tell a story about the product they make second. And that's why we're seeing this kind of explosive success. I don't know how many people have signed up for their ultimate beanie around the world thing. I signed up. I didn't even get the top 100. And I had to pay an extra $20 for a beanie. But I'm so excited because they're delivering on their story matches the value of their product. That's the point. And we live in a moment where because of kind of massively open communication, you can actually tell a story before you become the real deal, before you've created the value in the first place. And that, in the short term, might feel like an advantage. In the long term, it's a disadvantage. So job 1, create value. Job 2 is bring that value to market. And again, here I'm not talking about how do you sell something. What I'm talking about is how do you let people know about it in a way that it fits for them. Another really helpful resource, if you're jotting notes on your iPhone, there's a woman named Tara Gentile, Taragentile. And taragentile.com/map. She has this little really free resource, really free, like not just free, really free. This resource where she walks you through the process of understanding, like, who am I marketing to? Not just like in a demographic kind of way, but in a personal, social kind of way. What's the nature of the people I'm trying to talk to in a relevant way? And to build your value so that those folks can see it in a new light. And that process of marketing, you have to ask yourself, are there unfair advantages if I could get to know who I want to talk to and talk to them in a meaningful way, not just blast them with content? I think one of the reasons why this gathering is so significant for so many, and why I love Connecting Things just as a participant, is because it seems like there's an authentic set of values here. And even when Braden was up here a moment ago saying like, hey, we want your email, we're not here to spam you, you guys believed him. Do you realize how rare that is when people ask for an email? And that's because we've created the value here first, and then out of that value, we're bringing it so that we want to expand the conversation and make it more meaningful for more people. Third bucket is sales. Obviously, you don't sell, you don't have a business, but it's a great way to stand out from the crowd very quickly. And I think the sequence of sales is critical, now more than ever. If you spend your energy making meaning for people and then escorting them to a place where they're actively buying as opposed to you're selling to, that can make a massive difference. Not could. It is the only way to make a massive difference in the era we have. And when you do that, you create an unfair advantage. Fourth bucket is you deliver that value. So you've made the value, you've marketed the value, you've sold the value, now you have a customer, now you get to deliver on your promises. And that, ironically, is a great place to really screw it up for your business or really make it for your business. If you surprise and delight people, Seth Godin has said this for years, in the process of giving people what they bought, what do they become? Evangelists for your brand. They're eager to run around and sell it on your behalf. Now you're in a great position. You're creating unfair advantages. But what if you do all this and you haven't created a sound business model? You haven't actually built this in a viable way so that you can actually build beyond this. Like where the business itself, how you're making your money, is going to serve you beyond just the transaction. You have to have a model that makes sense. In fact, it's funny, most of my conversations with creatives, where they make it or break it isn't on their talent. It's mostly on they haven't gotten a bookkeeper. They mess it up with some silly little goof where if they had their house in order in terms of their modeling, they would have really served them. And if you do that well, compared to your competitors who aren't doing it well, what do you create? A massive unfair advantage. Then there's systems, like the systems of how you do all of that. You take all of that stuff, the great business model, the great value, the great marketing, the great sales. If you put that into a system that's increasingly productive and efficient and profitable, well, what do you get? An unfair advantage. And then finally, people. You think about the advantages you can create with how you work with people. And even who are these people? The people are things like, well, your customers are some people. Your team are some people. Your vendor set, like people you partner with to deliver the goods, are your people. But the number one person that I have found where you can get the most significant unfair advantages is with yourself. I get in my own way more often than anyone else. Have anyone else noticed that besides me? Yeah, those limiting conversations we have with ourselves. And when we do that, we get in our way. If we get out of that, and there are tools to use to get out of your own way. And when you do that, you create an unfair advantage. Now, me very quickly jumping through all those kind of broad stroke categories, what you may have noticed already is it's not helpful. It's helpful in the sense that it can give you a methodical, systematic way to think through your business and go, are there opportunities here that I haven't mined yet, but if I did, I could stand out in a unique way. And that's great. But we also recognize we live in a moment where having more content is not sufficient, is it? It's necessary, but it's insufficient. So then the question becomes, how do I move from knowing the path to actually walking it, to actually implementing these great ideas in a way that actually gets tangible, concrete results? And I would argue that it comes down to shifting your mindset, shifting in your perspective on how you're relating with yourself. I'll just spend 2 or 3 minutes on this very quickly. There's a way that most people enter their working life that I'm going to call the do, have, be life. So I do stuff, right? So I can have stuff, and then when I have stuff, I get to become a great person. Okay, keep it real simple today. So I do a lot. How many people work a lot? They do a lot of stuff? Yeah, we do a lot of stuff, right? And then GTD, we do a lot of stuff. And then we get stuff, have stuff, and then we get to become something. And what I want to make the case for is that sequence is problematic. And the problem, it's a little nuanced, it's a little way of relating a little differently, but if you decide to reverse it and say instead of do be, you go with, I've decided to be an owner, and based on being an owner, that will tell me the things I need to go do, my marching orders. Like, what would that guy do if he was actually on key, like working it, like an owner? And it turns out when you are that person and you do the kinds of things that that person would do, they get the life they're looking for. But the problem is being is not very sexy. Like, this is not like exciting. It's not, you're not action oriented. You're not driven. You're driven in a certain kind of way, but the results are down there. And this moment of deciding to be an owner, I would argue, is the hardest decision for every creative entrepreneur. But if you get it right, everything shifts. The whole world turns technicolor. I mentioned before this notion of like being the thing before you sell the thing. This is where this kicks in. I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine, Tara Gentili, I mentioned her earlier, and Tara and I were talking specifically about how do you discern like priorities of like what you're going to go do. So we just talked about a bunch of ideas, and you all are going to walk out of here in a few moments and try to decide like what do I do next. You're going to have a weight problem, like which thing gets the most weight in your day. And she had this great kind of technical business term. I've already forgotten what it is, but the idea was like, what one thing does your future self want you to be spending time on holistically? And then based on that one thing, what sub-things will tell you what to go do? I've shifted it a little bit because I'm a simpler guy, and you can't really see, but this is my WTF IT focus. And this would be inappropriate. We're in a public space. I'm not going to use the F word. But it should be whatever the F it takes focus to get all in on one direction. So even right now as I'm talking, if you think about where you need your business to be, say in the next quarter, 6 months, year, and if you can align that to a singular focus where, like, no kidding, this is success and everything else is fail, what would be a game changer for you? And honestly, if we could just talk back and forth for just a second, would anyone be willing to be vulnerable enough to say, like, if this happened for my business 12 months from now, if this was in place and it's not in place right now, everything would shift? Would anyone be willing to take a risk and say what that might be for them? I'm going to drink my beer-looking coffee for a second and wait. Any one person. What I love about connecting things is that they're so communal and they're just so eager to share. Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
If I got 5 committed illustrators to be a part of my project.
Okay, so if you got 5 committed illustrators to be a part of his project, we don't even need to know what the project is, but what I love about that right out of the gate is it's measurable, it's concrete and specific, and I'm curious, what's your first name?
Daniel.
Daniel, forgive me, we met and I blew it. So, cheers. If Daniel got his 5 people to get all in on this project, what kind of a difference would that make for your business?
That would get it off the ground floor, and then I could continue with the rest of my business plan.
Okay, so if that's your singular WTF IT focus, and you got all in like an owner relative to that, can you see how there will be sub-tasks that will also present themselves to get you to that point? But there'll also be plenty of distractions that will get in the way of you getting to that point. Is that fair? In fact, some of those distractions might be really attractive. Like, I kind of like doing those things, and they seem easier and doable, and it's easier to put off this other thing. And then all of a sudden, it's no longer a whatever it takes focus. It's now a if I get there, that's great focus. And whenever I find myself drifting away from that kind of level of commitment, what's happening is I'm realizing I'm drifting away from being that owner that I need to be. So that's the invitation as we go through the day. What will bug you? What will be that one thing that you're like, if that shifted, that would be the linchpin piece for everything to shift for my business? And how can I align all of my resources, the value I create, the marketing, the selling, the distribution, all of it in the direction of getting that thing accomplished? And if you think you're really like all in and you really get it, I would argue that your focus probably still needs more focus. You're probably still in a place where, like, if I could go a little further. Like, this is such an easy example. I would like you all, if you would, I have one request. Will you do what I'm about to ask you? Can I just get a yes? It's not crazy. It's just, okay. All I want you to do, I'm going to make the request once, and I want you to do exactly what I ask. I'd like you to hold your hand up as tall as you possibly can. Okay, hold it. Okay, now go a little higher. Okay, why did everyone's hands go up? Because you held back. You weren't all in owner. And it's such a little way, a tiny back door to make sure that I don't go all in, that I leave a little back. And why do we do that? Because we're a little scared. What if we go all in and it doesn't work? This is Seth Godin 101. If you don't know Seth Godin, you need to spend some time with him. But it might not work. But the chances of it working go up radically when your hand goes all the way up in the first place. And when we talk about competitive advantages, unfair advantages, all of your neighbors are only going this far. All of them, especially in Orange County, because they want to look cool. So they're like, so you guys have an opportunity here. Another great opportunity is when you find yourself resisting things. This is a great little book that if you don't know already, you should. It's kind of a once-a-year book for me, but The War of Art by Steve Pressfield. What's great about when you notice the resistance coming up for you is that's like a blue light special, like it's a clue, it's a tell that you're heading in the right direction. If you're not feeling resistance, be wary. That means you're not actually doing the WTFIT focus thing. So picture life a year from now. Play the long game. Don't just build a to-do list, build a to-be list. Who are you becoming? A to-be list is simply a choice to set yourself up to win regardless of circumstances. It's putting yourself in a position where if you are that person, even if the sky falls, you will find a way. Another way to frame it that I really like is this notion of condition versus position. Cheesy slide, but this guy's condition is he's hurting. This person he's a baseball player even if he's hurting. He's focusing on his position, not his circumstances. And if you're interested in becoming something new, my encouragement is also to start small. I don't know about you, but for whatever reason, I find that everything in my life goes better when I floss my teeth. Everything goes better. It's like this weird corollary. When I do these little habits in my life, really good things happen in my life. People chuckle at me, but it's true. I guarantee you. This morning, I pulled floss out, and I put it in my pocket. Gross, I know. And then I had breakfast, and then flossed my teeth in the bathroom. But I'm telling you, it wasn't just for you people. It's because it tells me that I'm on my A game. I'm here because I'm an owner in the things that I want to be about. In just 2 minutes, we're going to do a quick little Q&A, and then we'll be done, and you guys will be out of here. But I wanted to show, and it's kind of a bummer because of the sunlight and stuff, but honestly, all you need to do is hear the words of this little, very short little clip, 2 minutes. But it's by this guy named Zafrank. Anybody know Zafrank on the internet? He's one of my favorites ever. Really, really funny guy. This is a little bit less on the funny side, more on the serious side. But the reason I want to share it is because more than anything, I want you guys to understand the gravity of our circumstances. We live in a moment where everybody gets to play. Anybody can get in any of these games that we're all playing. And that wasn't always true. But today it is true. But what the sadness of that is because everyone can get in the game, it kind of feels as though we're all doing it, man, let's go. But it's not a situation where everybody wins. It's just everyone gets to play. And I've been old enough now to realize I've seen cycles where a lot of people get started. Not everyone gets the benefits of seeing it all the way through. And if you do the math on the folks in this room, not everyone will be in this kind of conversation in 5 years. Reality will hit. Circumstance will take you out. Something. But how do you put yourself in a position where you get to do the stuff that you love? Well, it's by these little incremental benefits, these kind of all-inness in certain categories. But again, the stakes are high. And if you're not playing with these stakes in mind, I think you're at a disadvantage. So let me just play this, and then we'll do a couple questions.
These are roughly 28,835 jelly beans. I counted out 500 of them and used those to weigh the rest. In this pile, there's one jelly bean for each day that the average American will live. You might have more beans in your life, or maybe less, but on average, this is the time we have. Here's a single bean. It's your very first day, a special day, but kind of a rough day on everyone involved. Add 364 more and you have the first year of your life. Now, for a sense of scale, here are your first 15 years, 5,475 days, which brings us to the threshold of adulthood. And at that moment, this is the time that we have left. And this is, on average, what we will do with all that time. We will be asleep for a total of 8,477 days. If we're lucky, some of that time we'll be sleeping next to someone we love. We will be in the process of eating, drinking, or preparing food for 1,635 days. We'll be at work, hopefully doing something satisfying, for the equivalent of 3,202 of those days. 1,099 days will be spent commuting or traveling from one place to another, maybe a little bit more if you live in LA. On average, we will watch television in one form or another for a total of 2,676 days. Household activities, like chores and tending to our pets and shopping, will take another 1,576 days. And we will care for the needs and well-being of others, our friends and family, for 564 days. We'll spend 671 days bathing, grooming, and doing all other bathroom-related activities, and another 720 days will go to community activities, like religious and civic duties, charities, and taking classes. After we remove all those beans, this is what remains. This is the time that we have left. Time for laughing, swimming, making art, going on hikes, text messages, reading, checking Facebook, playing softball, maybe even teaching yourself how to play the guitar. So what are you going to do with this time? How much of it do you think you've already used up? If you only had half of it, what would you do differently? What about half of that? How much time have you already spent worrying instead of doing something that you love? What if you just had one more day? What are you going to do today?
All right. It's sobering, right? At least it is for me every time I see it. So we just have a few moments before you bust out of here, and I don't presume that there are questions or whatever, but there are. I'd love to chat before we get out of here. Feeling awkward, I'm going to drink my coffee again. 1 second. Yes, ma'am. How do you figure out that one thing you focus on? Isn't that the hardest question of all? But here's the other thing. Tell me your first name again. Janet. It's a great name. I don't hear Janet enough. That's great. What's great about Janet's question is that is the question that I want. There isn't a trite, quick little answer to, except to say, notice the other conversations that are going on right next to that question. That question is the right question. Simultaneous to that are other voices, I suspect, if you're like me, that are saying things like, don't pick the wrong one. Don't screw it up. You're going to go down that road. It's going to be a waste of your time. And as you're paying more attention to those voices, what's happening? You're paralyzed. You're not going anywhere. So I would actually say that the best thing to do is make your best guess and go all in after that. And if you're 6 months in and you're like, yeah, that wasn't it, go someplace else. You're going to be further along doing that, and I've actually learned something radical in those 6 months that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And that will serve you, I promise you, in the next assignment. But all the while you're kind of overly thinking it, your friends are going to eat your lunch because they've decided. Yes, ma'am.
How do you balance like that?
I don't. I hate balance. I hate everything about balance. I hate the whole idea. I can't stand it. I think it's a baloney idea that we were never meant to do as human beings ever. It's silly.
Maybe a better question is,
Okay.
do you neglect your family and friends?
I do neglect my family. My wife's right here. She'll tell you. Here's the thing, though. When I am with my family, I am all in with my family. That's my commitment. I fail all the time, but that is my radical WTF focus when I'm with my family. When I'm away from my family and I'm here, and thankfully my wife's here right now, but when I'm here, I need to be all in here, because if I'm all in here or some other town where I had a chance to talk to folks or do whatever I'm doing, then I can create enough value so when I get home, I can actually be all in with my family. But this notion of kind of holding these things in tension and how does everybody get the right egalitarian amount of stuff, that doesn't work in my world. I have seen the super successes be people who find themselves this rare ability to shift gears quickly and go from all in to all in to all in to all in. And then when I leave here, you guys are dead to me. I love you, but I won't be here anymore. I'll be at the next place. And I think that'll actually, and you guys shouldn't be here either come 3 minutes from now. You need to be on to the next thing and be all in that space. And I think that's a better metaphor, that living in that tension rather than balance, I think you're going to find over time that'll serve you best. One last question, if there is one. Cole.
For you specifically, what did it look like to make that journey from freelancer to
What was it like to make the jump from freelancer to owner? That's a great question, man. I kind of want to ask you that question, actually. But because I feel like I'm both a fraud all the time and I get it right all the time. Like I'm living in that tension too. And the truth is, there's moments where I just play it safe. I wake up one day and I don't. And my goal is really just to decide on a present daily basis. It's not like you've passed a threshold and you're now an owner for life. It's more kind of every day I have to decide it again. And this morning I decided it. And I'm all in right now. And I love that. But I am also at stake or at risk of missing the mark tomorrow. When that happens, how quickly can I notice it, get off of the drift, and on to what it really matters in the next stage. So that's it for now. I'm grateful for you guys. Thanks for coming.